button. And we're live. Welcome along, everyone, to this week's live stream. I'm Dan Fowley, and as always, have Peter Chalmers with me. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Dan, and thank you for having me.
So today it was announced, Peter, that Dreamforce is going virtual.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, I suppose, in the overall scheme of things. It will certainly make it a very different event. I think what we saw with the Sydney World Tour being a virtual event, which was the first one they actually ran, which in my eyes was actually a very, very good event. And didn't lose any of the flavour that you would normally have from a Salesforce event. Got to actually probably see more than what I would normally do because of the way it was set up. So I hope that Dreamforce is going to be the same type of thing. But that amount of content over several days will be quite interesting to watch and put together. I feel for the guys at Salesforce that run the event and how they're going to do it, because it will be probably more bedlam than it would normally be, given it's a that change in that model from the face-to-face delivery to online is quite a big leap. So
Yeah, well, logistically, because what have previous years been? 1,200 sessions, breakout sessions plus? It's
something
been
like that, yeah.
big in scale.
So I mean that
yeah.
actually does raise an interesting question, because every year they get more requests for sessions than what they can handle. Will we see them actually be able to deliver a lot more content because they're not going to be constricted by the lack of venues in the venue space? The upside, I suppose, is also that people won't be exhausted from walking around San Francisco so much. So,
Well, I think a lot of people will save a lot of money on accommodation because that was being an absolute rort over the recent years.
yeah,
Getting somewhere
isn't
to
it?
stay and walking kilometres each day, just trying to get to the venue and back.
Yeah, it's look, but at the same time, that's part of the flavour. That's some of the stuff that I enjoyed. It was, you're walking down the streets in San Francisco and you bump into someone from this side of the world that you wouldn't normally see, even if you're in the same city and within two streets apart where you work. But seeing them over there somehow made it even more special. So that's probably one of the downsides to that. It would be great to see if there's some kind of virtual after parties. Can you
That's
imagine
what I
what
was
that would
thinking
be
as
like?
well. The parties are the legendary parts. So how are they going to recreate that?
It would be unusual. It would be different. But again, look, we're in times where we've got to do things in a different way. So I'm sure. And the other thing is, Salesforce always comes up with cool and interesting ways to do things. So a virtual Dreamforce party.
Well,
Benioff,
maybe
if you're watching,
you could mix the virtual and the real world, right? So as long as we can have events in our own regions, maybe you have local
yeah,
after parties of
true.
different things happening. Maybe viewing parties where we can all gather in our cities in the same place and watch some of the keynote sessions and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on what the restrictions are going to be like around that time. So, hopefully by that stage, things will be a lot more relaxed than what they are now. And even if it's just small groups of people coming together would be pretty cool. Um, I'm up for hosting a barbecue and beers and viewing party.
What about the band? How are they going to recreate that?
Uh, One does wonder what the band would have been anyway.
Yeah.
Um, Again, we're seeing some really interesting things happening around bands getting together, or from around the globe. We had the event on Saturday night for Anzac Day, which I think was broadcast over in New Zealand as well. And one of the best um, things I saw there was Crowded House. So Neil Finn over in LA, the kids I think were over there somewhere, or maybe they're in New Zealand. Nick Seymour I think is based over here in Melbourne, and that song they did was magic. So again, will we see something like that? But it will be different. There is no doubt about it.
Mm. That should be interesting. They managed to pull off the Sydney World Tour event virtually at pretty short notice,
Yep.
with some pretty high production value. So you could only think that if they've got now a few months to prepare for this being a dedicated virtual event, global in nature, that they've got what it takes to pull off something pretty special.
Yeah. Again, the speed that the Sydney World Tour was pulled together was magic, and it was delivered so well. They're going to have, what have we got? We've got Trailhead DX as well coming up, so that's a virtual event. We've got some other world tours, so there's some more practice that will be done before we get to Dreamforce. The good thing is also that we get to see those events that we wouldn't normally get to do, won't get to go to unless you're physically there as well. So yeah, it's an interesting time. I hope also that there's going to be some kind of leveraging of Trailhead in some way around that stuff as well. It'd be great if there's some kind of interactive. I'm thinking, maybe even coding sessions and things like that when you're doing a trail and all that type of stuff as well. There'd be a bunch of cool things, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. How do you bring the interactive aspects back to it instead of just a one-way delivery of information? Even I'm thinking from the likes of just you could go to some really specialized breakout sessions at Dreamforce, and at the end of the session, the queue of people wanting to ask questions of the speaker is 20 deep.
Yeah.
So, and Q&A has been an important part of, some of those quite technical breakout sessions where, people are really eager to get an answer because they've had that same specific problem. So that'll be interesting. A chat is somewhat limiting in how you can convey a question, whether there'll be some way that they can, through different technologies or whatever, allow people to either live or submit pre-recorded questions just to bring of interactivity to it. That'll be really interesting to see. Or another one was like at the dev zone, they would have areas where you could sit down and do those trailhead challenges, and there'd be someone walking around to help you.
Yeah.
So how do you, recreating something like that, if they can pull that off, again, would be pretty cool. And then you think about, what are some of the byproducts of this new world that we live in, and that kind of thing could be one that it actually develops new approaches to virtual conferences that didn't exist before. And then suddenly you realize this is becoming the norm for how these kind of conferences are run.
Yeah, it's interesting, I mean, we've seen so many businesses pivot so quickly because they've had to. The amount of change and the ability to change has occurred so fast that some of it's been really, really quite surprising. I've got some friends that run a business over here, and part of what their business is focused on is hackathons, and they're now running hackathons online and this is going from a whole, doing a workshop, doing a design, having your all your different boards and all that type of stuff, and the way they've put that together, and it's a product in itself, what they're actually using the technology for, but then how they're delivering it too. It's really impressive. So I'm sure there'll be something very similar again. I learn from doing in the first place, and also having someone help me get through things. Yep. I don't typically learn much from reading. Google's my friend. That's reality.
All of our friends.
But if we don't have that type of mentoring that happens along the way, or someone that's peering over your shoulder saying, hang on, do it this way, because there's always, and especially in Salesforce, there's always about 10 different ways you can do things. There's the right way to do things is the one that always is the best, and there's 10 different right ways at the same time. So, but having someone with that experience and then going, have a think about this or do it that way, that's the bit that we'd miss in that virtual type of, or potentially miss in that virtual type of event.
I guess we'll get some strong clues at the Trailhead X conference, which I don't think they've set a date for that yet. I think it's normally around June, July timeframe. And that'll be interesting, like you say. That's the kind of event that I've been once to that event before, but actually I think you were at the same one.
I didn't actually go to the event, but I did. But
but these are the kind of things that we'll be able to drop in on now. We might not have gone to the dedicated event, but if we see an interesting session, come up this year can drop in and learn something and drop out again.
Mm.
Have you had a favorite band that you've seen at Dreamforce over the years?
Okay, so interesting question, and it will probably. So you say interesting band. Your first thoughts would be, who's done the gala or that type of thing. I mean, the first year I went, Stevie Wonder played. That was fantastic. But the best band, the band that I loved the best, was Huey Lewis and the News, and they played in the keynote.
Yeah.
But what I didn't know was walked outside after the keynote and walking between the two Moscone centers, and that's when they had that cloud set up.
Yeah, I remember it.
And there was a band set up there, and I thought, I wonder what's going on. So I just hung around for a little while. I think I was waiting to catch up with someone, and actually Natalie from who was working for volunteers over there in New Zealand at the time. So I was waiting for her to turn up, and then all of a sudden, and there was like 50 people sitting on seats, and Huey Lewis and the News started playing. It was magic. Yes, I'm old, and I know I'm going to own it. It was fantastic. Being so close to Huey Lewis and the News, and they were so on it, and something you wouldn't expect to get at any technology conference at all. That was the best. What about you? What's the most memorable one for you?
Well, I've had multiple memories. There was first year I went Black Crows, I think it was. Didn't really leave much of a mark. Second year, Stevie Wonder, like you mentioned. Stevie Wonder was great, but a similar experience to your Huey Lewis story. As everyone was walking out from Stevie Wonder, will.i.am started playing a DJ set, and it wasn't advertised. And so a lot of people had already left, and as I was with a bunch of other Kiwis that were all hanging out together, and as we were kind of walking out, like he started playing like 5 meters away, and we suddenly found ourselves at the front of this ad hoc will.i.am concert, and then different Black Eyed Peas came out on stage, and then I found some really awkward footage of Mark Benioff dancing on my phone the other day when I was cleaning out some old videos and stuff. But that was really cool and memorable. Then I remember it was the next year. It was the first time Metallica played, and back then this conference was still at a size where they would do the concerts in Moscone, the same place. They'd somehow clear out all the seats from the keynote, set it up for a band, and then they'd have it ready to go for another keynote 8 a.m. the next morning. And this must have been when things were starting to get too big. I remember I got down there late because I'd start for a long day. I'd fallen asleep at my hotel, woke up, was like, Metallica's starting in 5 minutes, ran down, and they weren't letting people into Moscone, apparently. And there's kind of rumors going around why that was the case, and it was apparently the fire marshal had shut it down because it wasn't safe, too many people. And so the concert started, we can kind of hear the bang, bang, bang from the outside. Really want to get in there. And while everyone's waiting around, someone exited from the fire escape. And as the door shut, it just didn't shut all the way. And then so one person went down and kind of got the door open. And then suddenly there was just this flood of people, and I just got caught up and went for it. And then suddenly, and there were no lights, so it was really dangerous. We were tripping over stuff, and then ended up down in the concert venue and got to participate in it. So that was pretty memorable, just for the sake of getting in when I thought it was too late. And then the last one that I'll never forget as well is the Foo Fighters. It was that 2016 maybe. Sounds about right, 15 or 16. And that was when they had the Killers, Foo Fighters, and someone else, 3 different stages, and just the venue and setup in these abandoned yards or whatever they were was quite incredible. And again, we managed to, there was 3 or 4 of us Trinios, and we managed to get quite near the front, stone's throw from Dave Grohl. It was when he had his broken leg, and it was playing, on the throne. It was a pretty cool concert, that one.
It was around about that time, but when things got just too big to go to the. Well, I didn't go the year that Metallica played, and that was almost a defining moment as well. It sort of, Metallica's not something you would normally play at to that demographic, I feel,
Yeah.
of people that turn up at Dreamforce anyway. So it sort of was a polarizing moment around that. And then the year when they had 3 bands with the Killers and the Fighters, and it was just, there were so many people, and I hadn't been to a concert, well, in a long time, simply because of the amount of people that were there. I'm not a fan of. I'm okay with crowds. It's the getting home bit is the bit that annoys me. And all I could see on Twitter was, oh, there's no buses, and people walking back to the city and all that type of stuff. I will say that we had a better strategy, that we went to an Irish bar and just sat at the bar and had a few beers during that time, and then everybody came back in after. So, and it wasn't Foley's, I will say that, just for the record.
I don't know. That reminds me now of the year that Green Day played, and they had that one at the baseball stadium, which they've used a couple of times, AT&T Park, I think it is. And it was just, the weather was horrific, because I remember trying to get home in the rain afterwards. And we were all up in the stands. Not many people were down on the playing field close to the stage. And the sound tent, the roof was starting to cave in as it was filling with water.
Oh.
To the point that eventually the roof gave in. All this water landed on the sound desk, blew up amps, whatever happened, and suddenly they couldn't play. And so they found one amp or something, or one microphone that was working, and basically started playing an acoustic gig. But you had to be up close. So a couple of us went down, braved the rain. This will be a unique experience, and it was. And then over the course of the next 45 minutes, they managed to somehow resurrect their sound setup, and they saw an extra band member would join in, and before they got the whole band back together. But yeah, that was another interesting experience from the bands. And then the long walk home, as you say, because you can't get an Uber, or it's just madness.
I mean, it was also, it's Uber started over there, so there's always, the ability to catch it, and it was when Uber was just the black cars over there as well, back in those days. But yeah, man, so much walking, so many hills in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. In the last few years, we've always found accommodation like over the hill. So every morning and every night, you found yourself walking up one side and down the other side, or through that tunnel or something. Yeah, compared to the first few years, I remember being able to get a hotel by Union Square or something, and actually being reasonably close. So
well, the first year we went, we actually stayed at Union Square, and that's how close we were. But yeah, well, that certainly has changed. Although we'll see what happens next year, I suppose. So,
yep. Did you go the year that they had the giant cruise liner?
Yes, in actual fact, we had our MVP party on the cruise liner.
What was that all about? What was that?
That was actually the first time Apex and the Limits played as well.
Yeah.
At the MVP party. So there you go. And that was a weird experience. Turning up to a cruise liner and look, the security getting on board and all that type of stuff. It was just a very, very, very strange thing. Didn't get to see much of it. We were in one room only, but there's a common theme through all this. It was a very unique experience. It was, and they haven't done it since, but it was interesting. As I said, also interesting that Apex and Limits played for the first time.
Yep. And you were we
weren't too bad.
Drummer?
Yep.
Actually, I think you've got your drum kit right behind you, don't you?
Yes. Which one am I going? There you go. You can see that there. You might be able to see that. I've just got back into drumming again after a hiatus of a few years. So trying to pick the skills up again. It's like falling off a bike. It hurts.
And how many songs did Apex and the Limits have?
I feel that I should know the answer to that, and I do not know. I actually don't know. But there is a YouTube channel which does have have them out there. So if you go to YouTube and search Apex and Limits, you will see some embarrassing stuff that is all about parodies in Salesforce. So
I feel like there was half a dozen when I saw you play at the TrailDX conference that first year.
I think we did 3 songs at that.
3, okay.
So yeah. That was good fun. That was going across. The shortest trip I've ever done, I was on the ground. I left on, when did I leave? Sunday, and I was back here on the Wednesday night.
Right.
So, and no one knew that we were doing it. Well, that was part of it. And the hotel we stayed at too was a new hotel, which was very much done up in that rock star type of fashion as well. So it had that whole flavour to it. And madness. I mean, it was good fun. It was the ability to open up for anything, quite frankly, is great. But at that venue and just doing it, I think I came back and we did a cloud grab with Andrew Everingham on the Wednesday night. So it was, hang on, you were just in San Francisco? Yeah, it was quite fun.
Yeah, that venue was quite cool actually from memory. Had a lot of history on the walls when you walked in of all the people that have played there over the years.
Well, we were apparently using the green rooms that Lenny Kravitz was using. And in our heads, we were in the same green room as Lenny Kravitz. We were not, absolutely not in the same room, but, and we certainly were not treated like Lenny Kravitz either.
Yeah. Any more MVP experiences of note over the years? Get to meet anyone, Parker or Mark or anything like that?
Well, funny, I met Mark at that Trailhead DX when we were standing there waiting to go on. We were being told, wait. We're just waiting for Benioff to turn up, and then he turned up, and he was there, and it was like the enigma of. It was like,
He's a big guy.
Everybody was in awe.
He's tall. He kind of stands
extremely
tall
and somewhat imposing and all that type of stuff. So yeah. But I mean, we've been in the same room with him, several times before that with MVPs and in various things. But we. In the early days, there was a thing called the MVP Summit, which they'd get all of us across the globe into San Francisco, and we'd get to spend some time with the different product managers. Benioff would come along and do a bit of a spiel as well, and Parker was the one that really sort of drove that a lot. So, I think the most memorable one with that was the time when they were rolling out Lightning. So it was before Lightning was actually rolled out, and Parker and Shauna and all those guys were asking us for advice and feedback on what they're about to roll out. So that's one of the very good things about Salesforce, in that they lean on the community to help determine what their path is going to be on the product, and they validate all that before they go out. And I think that's helped them along the way to make sure that they've got a very viable product that actually does get used as much as what it does. But, it wasn't lip service. We gave some very strong feedback on some things, and some of it did change the direction of the product. So not too many companies, I think, do that type of thing. So
yeah, I think that's one of the big differentiators to other enterprise software, is that whole community aspect, which both from the people involved, even just I remember in the very early days, the number of people on Twitter and from the Salesforce ecosystem was huge, and you could very easily get to know lots of different people, and that seems to differentiate them from other enterprise software that I've seen. And I don't follow SAP or other systems closely, but I don't know that they've come up with anything similar, and it's the kind of thing, if you tried to add it in later and reverse engineer it, you're not going to be able to do it. It has to kind of naturally be a grassroots thing.
Yeah. I mean, the community, it is such a wonderful and very large thing as well. And we've seen it grow so much from those very early days. 2010 is when I jumped on this side of the fence, when I was got in the consulting world and going to the first user group where there were, there was about 20 people in the Sydney user group, I suppose, that turned up. And it was run consistently. It was run every month and all that type of stuff at the time. And going and having those type of conversations around, I've got this problem, or this week we're going to run through how you should set up an opportunity and all this stuff. And it was, a lot of it might have been well, you look at it now and go, well, that was really grassroots, what they were running through and that. But you look throughout the room and there was light bulbs going off of different people's heads because they hadn't seen things that way before. So, I'm not from the technology world. I come from FinServe and from an accounting or finance operations background. So seeing those type of things was very much an eye opener. And then we've just seen it expand so much with not just the user groups, but also the community online, with Trailhead and all those type of initiatives as well. There's some very smart ways of making sure people can upskill to do what they need to do.
Yeah, we've seen the whole dreaming events come up. I don't even know. I think the first ones that I remember seeing on advertised were Tahoe dreaming and sort of getting away to a sort of exotic location for a weekend, that kind of thing. But then those have just taken off globally. And we were meant to have our very first one in New Zealand next week. Which
was next week, wasn't it?
It was going to be next week. So, hopefully one day we'll get to have events again, but get that off the ground. But those events have taken off, and I think there is a virtual dreaming coming up somewhere online soon.
Well, interesting. That one was actually being planned as a virtual before any of this stuff happened. So which again talks to how big that community is, that there's a need to have a virtual dreaming event. So,
they certainly found their place, and the fact that they're completely community organised, speaks volumes for the community itself.
There's a lot of people put time into the community. One of the catchphrases out of Salesforce is Ohana. That was one thing that seemed to have got born a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of truth behind that it is one big family, or it feels that way at times. And as family, we tend to help each other out. And I've seen that, whether it's be it a customer, be it another partner, or whatever it is. And typically it's when you get together, and Dreamforce is a really good example, when we all get together in one place at one time, and you get to see, again, those people you don't normally see. But, those conversations aren't just around, what have you done for the last 12 months? It's also, I've been working on this, or got stuck on it. And you can banter things around. Typically, it's going to be over a beer, funny enough, at Dreamforce. But it's something that it's unusual. You don't usually have competing partners having those type of conversations where people are generally happy to help others out. So,
yeah, the number of times that I've ended up at a diner after midnight with a bunch of people from other New Zealand partners, because you're bound together by the fact that you're all Kiwis as opposed to the fact that you're competitors, and so that happens a lot. And it's funny, even with customers or prospects that go to Dreamforce, it's far easier to have a conversation with them when you've both travelled halfway around the world and you've got that in common, versus getting a coffee with them even if their office is only a few hundred yards down the road, just because they're in a different place and a different mindset and more willing to have those conversations.
I think the other bit is that we get to see all the new stuff. Or typically that's what would happen with Dreamforce, is they'd roll out the big initiatives, and you get the flavour of what things were coming out, and that would then stimulate those conversations around as well. What you could be doing, what you should be doing.
Yeah, that's one thing is they're very good, and I know there's a little bit of magic behind the scenes that makes some of those demos at Dreamforce, but they certainly get people thinking about the art of the possible.
Yeah, and I think that's really what those demos are about, really. I remember seeing one of those demos that was on a Virgin plane where they were using chatter between different seats. And I was like, interesting. Don't think that ever actually happened, but
No.
but the concept was actually quite good.
Yeah, I remember actually that reminds me of one of the original big Sydney World Tour events, probably 2012, 2013 or something. And they had this, flash video comes up on screen with Commonwealth Bank, I think it was. And then the CIO comes out on stage as the guest. And he's starting the interview, and they say, "Oh, isn't this great?" And he says, "Yeah, I hope it actually does that once you build it for us."
Oh, called out
So,
on stage.
Yeah, so you called them out straight away. So I believe they're still a customer, so must have got there in the end. But yeah, it was just highlighted that the whole thing was a little bit smoke and mirrors.
I think it tends to, the stuff they do now tends to be less smoke and mirrors. That you can actually see it is actually working. It's not so much a PowerPoint presentation. But look, still years ahead of things that we would have seen at an Oracle event or something like that. So
yeah, for sure. Well, we've gone down memory lane today, Peter, and talked about Dreamforce. Hit the half an hour mark, so it might be a good time to wrap it up for this week. But we'll be back to our usual time next week, midday New Zealand, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Time. And we'll just finish up just by our usual kind of chat about the Academy. So we're underway now, which is very exciting, and we have our next intake or onboarding next week. So this week's a great week to get on board as we look to bring people on every couple of weeks, just so that we can ensure that everyone has the best onboarding experience possible. And so for this week, we do still have our discount code running. So for anyone that wants to jump on this week, use the code on screen now, and you'll be able to get that discount for the program, jump on board. And it really does encompass a lot of the things that we've talked about today, that sense of community, getting assistance when you need it, consume information, just like all of those good aspects of Dreamforce that we talked about earlier on today, and deliver that through a tailored experience. So we will wrap it up there, but thank you for everyone for tuning in this week, and Peter, as always, a pleasure.
same. See you later.
Cool. See you next week, everyone.